compared to someone who was really knowledgeable on one subject or had really put a lot of thought into one thing, and he was kind of comparing the values of both of those, because it's like, if you're just talking and talk about whatever is coming up, there's not really a lot of value you're bringing into that subject or to that conversation. You're more likely just regurgitating the information you've gotten from other people. Meanwhile, someone who's taken the time to think about a specific thing or is more thoughtful about what they're speaking about or thinking about, they're more likely to come up with maybe their own ideas or bring more value to that conversation.
Are there any other, sorry, I shouldn't even ask, are there any? What are some other areas in life that people have very strong opinions and they're just kind of regurgitating things that they've heard before, never really thought about? And yet these are subjects that there are people who are really deep experts on. Politics.
History.
History. Give me an example.
Nazi laws.
Yay.
I think what he means is Hitler.
Always.
I thought
We should change that from everything leads to murder in Scallon's class to everything points to Hitler in Scallon's class. It's my third period class. Every time I ask you a question, like, give me an example. Well, let's say that, I don't know, let's say like you go to murder someone. You always go straight to that. This class always goes straight to Hitler. So what would be a person who thinks deeply about that issue versus someone who thinks superficially about the issue?
Historian?
Hmm?
Historian?
History, yeah. So what's some, yeah, okay. It's not going to fly. Others then. I'll just ask that. Other examples. Okay, I'll pursue it. So where would someone get information that they would, in that case, that they would just be regurgitating and just kind of repeating what they've heard?
Internet?
Okay. Yeah, so the internet, and there's nothing inherently wrong with the internet, but depending on like kind of like where we get information from. I think it was in this class, right? I talked about the Gell-Mann amnesia effect. Was it in this class? Yeah, this is a really important idea for us to understand. Gell-Mann. It's these two researchers, and it's called their amnesia effect.
So one's called Gall and one's called Mann?
Yeah, those are their last names. And in short, what they discovered is that Nico, what's something you know a lot about?
Guns.
Guns. Okay. All right. So now Nico opens up the New York Times, and he reads an article about guns. But because he knows a lot about it, he's very critical in how he reads. He says, he reads and goes, that's not the proper caliber. No, that's not true. No, that's not the law in California. No, that's misleading. And because he knows a lot about it, he finds all the mistakes that are in the article, and he reads it very, very critically. Now, anything that you know a lot about, you're going to read critically. You're not going to read so passively. It's almost like there's this exercise where we want to, even to ourselves, prove that we know a lot to ourselves without setting out necessarily with that in mind. Now, he'll read that and go, that's a terrible article. This writer, this journalist, has no idea what they're talking about. Then Nico turns the page, and then the next article is on Ukraine. And he knows nothing about Ukraine. And he goes, oh my God, all that's going on? This is terrible. How come nothing's being done? You see the problem. He's reading the exact same publication. He already knows that this publication, in this case the New York Times, hires writers who don't know what they're talking about. They wrote this horrible article about guns, and you know that they're unreliable. But then you read the very next article, and we assume that they are reliable. In other words, we assume that journalists are reliable in areas that we don't know anything about. And yet we're completely aware that they're not reliable in the areas that we do know something about. That's why it's an amnesia effect. It's like we completely forget that's the case. And so this is part of the problem with regurgitating things. It's that if it's something that we know about, well, then we know that the stuff is going to be wrong. But then if we don't know about it, man, we take that information and we run forward with it as though it's gospel. Well, that's not true. Here's what actually happened. And then there's always that person who go, well, how do you know? Were you there? No, I wasn't there when Hitler killed himself, so no, I don't know for sure. But there are ways of knowing, of course. But we have to kind of keep in mind whenever we're reading anything or listening to anything, this has to be, It's like how many rumors have to go around among the students here about stuff that happened before we finally at some point say, that's bullshit. The day of the lockdown, the gunman's on the second floor. Really? And there are people who believed it. There were people who were on the second floor panicking. And what did I say? I said, worst active shooter ever. No shots fired. Nothing going on. And then I heard that they're up there that the SWAT team is sweeping. I look out the window right here and I see nobody setting up a perimeter outside the building. I go, again, worst SWAT team ever. I asked about when you walk into a room, like when you walk into this room and you see this wooden thing in the corner, what do you see? Or there's one in front of you too. Yeah, what do you see? Desk. Okay, so but tell me what you see. What is it? It's a desk. I don't know what that means. Explain it to me. Okay, so you sit in it?
Miniature table.
What's that?
Miniature table.
It's a miniature table? You were saying?
Put stuff on it.
Put stuff on it? Okay. This is important. This is really, really important. When you walk into a room and you see things in the room, you don't see the thing itself. You see an object in terms of its functions. In other words, you don't see desk, wood, round, metal legs. What you see is something I can put papers on top of, something I can sit in, something I can write on. We see objects in terms of their functions, not in terms of the thing itself. One of the problems that we're having, for example, with AI, I told you one of my former students, he's doing cognitive science, he's specializing particularly in artificial intelligence. And one of the problems that they're having is trying to train artificial intelligence to not see objects, but to see function. So in other words, the problem is that when they create the software, it only sees object. It doesn't see function. And that's a problem. Because what that means, and by the way, it makes sense, because if you have papers, so if an artificial intelligence, you ask them, so what's the desk for? What would they possibly say that the desk is for? Artificial intelligence doesn't have papers. It doesn't have a body to need to sit down. So therefore, objects in the world are just problems. So far, so good. And don't miss that. Now, here's the trick. You walk into a room on the first day of school, maybe, or even in a Saturday school, a little bit unfamiliar, and you walk through that door and you look around. What are you looking around for? People you know, desk. So what are you seeing again? Objects in terms of their functionality.
Oh my God.
Which means you see the people in the room in terms of their functionality. Where are my friends? Where can I sit near? What do friends represent? Not necessarily in terms of people, but certainly in terms of function. I don't want to sit by myself. I don't want to be bored the whole time. I want to have someone near me. I want that safety, security, whatever.
Have I really been so cool to my friends?
What's that?
Have I really been so cool to my friends?
Yes, you all have. You're all terrible people.
Very.
Not me, but you guys. Horrible, terrible people. It turns out that the thing that makes us human is, well, I should preface it with this. I believe this. This is what I'm trying to demonstrate in some stuff I'm writing. That the thing that makes us truly human is this. In other words, this is what breaks down the object functionality of the world. So when I go up to a desk, I can't be like, "How you been, man?" Ignoring me. Who's your favorite student? So where'd you come from? I can't connect with the desk in any meaningful way because I can't communicate. I can't share experiences with the desk. When we sit down and when we see people at first, we see a function. And even if that functions, we finally turn to the person next to us in our math class and go, "Hey, how's it going?" And they'll be like, "Hey, this is math, right?" Yeah. And you try to break the ice and have some sort of a conversation. What you're trying to do is break down this wall and create empathy. In other words, you're trying to create connection with that person. The more of this you create, the more you can break down functionality. And now you can see people as people. And they're valuable not in terms of their functions, but in terms of just by virtue of the fact that they are. The fact that they exist in the world. Now, there's one group of people who are incapable of doing this and will always see people in terms of their function.
Rich people.
No. Psychopaths.
Oh.
Psychopaths. Psychopaths.
But he's kind of
Surprised you didn't say Hitler. Hitler! Yeah!
He's kind of onto something though. Let's think about that.
Same.
And so, when psychopaths are incapable of developing this thing called empathy. And so that means that they will always see people in terms of their function. Now it's a trick because it doesn't do any good to get angry at psychopaths. It's like, oh man, they're terrible. Oh, what the hell's wrong with them? They're simply incapable of doing it. It's like getting mad at a 5-year-old because they can't do trigonometry. God, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just, you just have to learn how to do it. No, at 5 years old, they're not going to. And a psychopath simply isn't capable of being able to do it. And so that it creates a problem for us because what that necessarily starts to do now is because we can't connect with them empathetically, what's the only way that we can process them as well in terms of function? So essentially psychopaths make us psychopaths in terms of how we interact with them. We can't have empathy for them. We can have sympathy for them perhaps, but that's not quite the same thing as empathy. So if you want to have human connection, I believe you have to create this one thing among people. And that means that we have to have conversations, we have to interact, we have to understand a lot about each other. And that's a really difficult thing for us to do. Especially, we're almost doing, well, not almost, we are encouraged, but I'll say that we're encouraged by the algorithms, as my friends and I say. We're encouraged by the algorithms to be hostile towards each other and to be outraged. It came up in my class yesterday for the first time, actually, the stuff about abortion. And, they kind of brought it up, and it's funny because people bring it up very gingerly. Like, it's just, I've heard, why are we so fragile about this? And they'll say, well, because we really shouldn't talk about it. Why not? Well, because it offends people. Okay, if you don't talk about things, guess what you can't form? Empathy. Empathy. You can't form these understandings. And if you can't form this, then that means that we will only ever treat each other as objects in the world, in terms of our functionality. It's important. People who are, let me ask you this question, maybe you guys will know this one. People who are in favor of abortion, why are they in favor of it? I would suggest that you don't know the sides very well.
Yeah.
I would suggest you don't know the sides very well. And books and volumes have been written about this. Even like the most recent one, Roe v. Wade, if that does get overturned, do you know what's being overturned?
The state.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, essentially it means that right now there's a federal protection. It wouldn't be federally protected. It would go to the states. So the states would decide. That's what it is. So if you live in California, it's probably going to be exactly as it is. States like that, they'll be identical. There will be a few states that will probably outlaw it. But for the most part, the states will get to decide. But people are talking about, like, they're going to overturn abortion, they're going to make abortion illegal again. No. I'm not saying that it's a good thing or a bad thing. All I'm saying is deal with the actual thing. Because I was talking earlier about empathy. Something that's missing from this, pro-abortion. Do you know why people want to be in favor of abortion? Because they want to murder babies. And do you know why people are anti-abortion? It's because they want to control women's bodies.
You know what? That is actually really well said. No, like, that's
No, it wasn't.
what I mean is that's basically what both sides are saying.
Control women.
That's what they're saying about the other side.
Well,
Yeah,
okay.
That's basically
Well,
what
good show.
Then you got the point. Very good.
Well said.
All right, no, you put your stuff away. Now, what I'm saying is, anybody in here who's pro-abortion, do any of you sit here in the morning and wake up and say, let's kill some babies today? You know? Anybody who's anti-abortion, do any of you guys sit there and go, let's control some women's bodies? No, but we have that caricature of the other side. If you have that caricature of the other side, that means we lack empathy. Then that means it's really easy to think the other side is terrible. If you're pro-abortion, you think that that's what they're really after, to control women's bodies, you probably never talked to someone who's pro-life, anti-abortion. If you're somebody who thinks that the pro-choice side is trying to control, is trying to murder babies, you've probably never talked to somebody from that side before and really understood it. There's one question in the whole debate. Is it a fetus? Is it a human being or is it not?
Yes.
The difference is that these folks don't believe it's a human being. These folks believe it is a human being. That's what it is. The folks over here are in their minds, are trying to save the lives of babies. Isn't that an admirable thing? Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. But can't you look at that and go, you believe that, and I see that you're trying to save human lives. I mean, aren't we all about trying to save children and protect children and all that? The folks over here, they don't think it's a human being. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to save lives in a different sense. They're trying to improve lives. When we stigmatize abortion, we make it this terrible thing. Like we say, it affects women's health, mental health. Part of the problem is because of that social stigma that we attach to it. If we just treated it like any other medical procedure, like the removal of a cyst or something like that, then maybe we probably wouldn't have such terrible mental health outcomes. But these folks over here don't think that they're murdering babies. These folks over here believe that they're saving the lives of babies. Both of them, if what they say is true, they're both admirable. The problem is that we don't deal with it like this. We deal with it with, keep your religion away from me. It's got nothing to do with religion. Religious people are more likely to believe that it's a human being, of course. You want to just murder, it's stupid. It's caricatures. But that's the thing that allows us to just post some of the dumbest goddamn stuff I've ever seen in my life on social media back and forth. We have to have empathy. We have to talk about these things. I don't know, by the way, I don't know that this is a bridgeable gap. I don't know that it is. Because I don't know how, if you believe it's a human being, I don't know how you can come off with that. I don't know where that middle ground is. If you believe it's not a human being, I don't know where that middle ground is. But it's interesting, it's like, if you're pro-abortion, it's like we recoil from that. And we say things like, well, I'm pro-choice. Okay, well, if you're anti-abortion, no, I'm not anti-abortion, I'm pro-life. No, this is what we are. These are the things that we are. And that's one of the things that we stigmatize, calling it what it is. If you're pro-abortion, that's what you are, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're anti-abortion, that's what you are, there's nothing wrong with that. Call things by their proper names, that way we're clearer. Because you see that now when you say things like pro-life, now all of a sudden there's all kinds of other things that go away from that. When you say you're pro-life, but you're in favor of this war over here, well, that's now expanded this issue way beyond what we're actually talking about. You say that you're pro-choice, but you want to stop me from, you want to force me to wear a mask. Isn't it my choice? That's way broader than what we're actually talking about. That's the problem with mislabeling things. Now we start talking about things that have nothing to do with the actual issue. But what it really comes down to is this thing I was saying earlier, empathy. Empathy. In order to develop empathy, you have to be able to listen without speaking essentially. A person who's essentially capable of remaining silent, in other words, listening to what both of these sides say. Once you understand what the other side says, now you can say something that's essential. Now you can understand what the real conversation is about. Otherwise, we're spinning our wheels because you might say, like, well, you say you're pro-life, but you're in favor of, I don't know, military intervention in Ukraine. And all of a sudden, we're arguing about whether or not there should be military intervention in Ukraine. And then, of course, then that leads us to the war in Iraq, and then, of course, the war in general then we're 2 miles from where we actually started, and of course vice versa. You said it's your pro-choice, but you want to force me to wear a mask, but that's my choice, my body. And then in fact, then you can get on this argument about, well, but then again, you can't use heroin. Heroin's supposed to be about your body, but we outlaw that. So there's all kinds of places where we outlaw what you can do with your own body. I mean, then all of a sudden we're talking about drug policy, which has nothing to do with the actual issue at hand. One thing at a time, one issue at a time. I think what you'll find is that when you do that, you'll develop a coherent system where all of these things will kind of work together. It won't be having to pull things out piecemeal to make sense of the world. You'll have an overarching view to help to make sense of the world. But we can only do that if we're willing to listen to what people have to say. And we should listen to people not just because they're humans, which, by the way, that's good enough reason. The fact that you're a human and I'm a human means that neither of us is better than one or the other. We might have better and worse ideas. We do have better and worse ideas, and we might be different in lots of ways, but in terms of our value as human beings, the things that we think, the things that we feel, those are and the value of all those things is absolutely equal. So just based on that, it's worth, we should hear people out. But then beyond that, if you can't do that, then you can't think essentially about things. And then what are we doing? We're just throwing words out in the universe. We're just sharing posts and things that are meaningless and distracting. It goes back to what I was saying an hour ago, it feels like, that we never get the opportunity to actually process things because we're just throwing stuff out. Or we see a post like, yeah, share it. So listen, it's good for you. It develops you, it makes you better. And it validates people around you. And it brings us closer together. How many downsides can you imagine there are to listening to people? How many downsides can you imagine there are to not listening to people? Yeah, way more, man. Way more. So, this is, by the way, that's the reason that I will say I don't trust people who stop me from trying to hear what other people have to say. People who try to shut you down, people who try to deplatform you, I inherently don't trust those people because they're trying to stop me from being able to remain silent and to hear what someone's saying. And then I know that that's going to eventually stop me from being able to think capably, or essentially. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Yes, yes, please.
That's what I like about your lectures. We always
Tell me what you like about my lectures.
We always go far apart, but somehow you always find a way to pull us back right to the start of where we began.
It's planned. I know it looks like I just make shit up as I go. I promise you I don't. It really is thought out ahead of time. Well, not too far ahead of time. But when I started off, I go, ooh, I could take this like 10 things in, but always bring it back. Yeah. So even if you sit there like, oh, just ask Alan questions, we'll get him off topic. No. I promise you, you will not. You will not. I'm much smarter than I pretend to be. I'm much smarter than I am. Others?
Oh, you look like Captain America in that one scene.
Yeah, I agree with you. Which scene, though? I do agree with you, but I want to know which scene.